Hey, welcome to Foreigner in the Philippines, and it's a beautiful evening. We're just getting ready soon to watch the sun go down, so we're out here on what has become my workshop, but it really is should be a pool deck. But then again, that tiled hole in the ground should be a pool, and all things take time, don't they? I really wanted to make a comment, not that it needs any more comments to be made, about the African American man who was, well, he was murdered, wasn't he, by a cop in America, and it was a very disturbing video to watch, because you know that the man's life is actually just eking away, and the cop was told many times, plus he was begged for his life by the man that he was pressing his knee down onto the man's neck so that he couldn't breathe. Now, they do that because it does disable the person, and is a difficult thing to get out of, especially if you've got handcuffs as well, unless you're Houdini. And the man said, actually said, "You're killing me, man." Now, there were other distressing factors about that, which I'm sure that everybody will have known. But there was one man, a witness, an onlooker, who identified himself as working for the fire department, who knew about first aid, and asked, could he check for the man's pulse? Can I check to see if he has a pulse, or words to that effect? And then it became clear after, I'm sure after 3 or 4 minutes, that the man was no longer responding, and yet he was still not released. If perhaps at that point he had been released, his life may have been saved. But what I wanted to talk about, what I wanted to point out, was that even though there were many witnesses who were there and were actually panicked and upset about what was happening, and tried begging the policeman to let the man up, just let him up. Even the man himself, the victim as it turns out, said, "Let me get in the car." And the cop, for some reason, while his knee was still on the neck of the man, said, "Get in the car, get in." How could he do that? He couldn't move. But this is the terrible thing about that situation, quite apart from the number one terrible thing, but a man who had committed no violent crime actually lost his life. And he lost his life in full view of many, many witnesses, and still felt that he was protected by his badge. And if you think about it, if that was 2 civilians, and one of those was killing the other person, any of those onlookers would have been able to step in and stop that from happening and save a life. But here, even though everyone watching knew, they felt helpless against the police, against the authority of the police. And the smaller cop that was there prevented people from approaching the cop who was down on the victim. So apparently there were 4 cops that were involved. They have to be in on it, because if you are standing there watching something happen that you could prevent, then you are guilty as well. But so far, as I know, none of those cops have been charged with the crime. Well, that was really what gave the town, the city, the flashpoint. That was the flashpoint for all that followed. Not justified by all that followed, but understandably in some people's minds, that was what allowed it. Now, I'm sure that if there had been enough, my feeling, if enough African Americans had been there at the scene, it would not have been allowed to happen. Whatever the cost to the people that interfered, it would not have been allowed to happen. But isn't it a very disturbing point that you can actually watch someone having their life taken from them, that you could stop if only you could challenge the authority that is taking the life. But yet, no one there felt that they could do that. That's a disturbing thing for me, which is ironic because not so long ago we used to get lots of letters asking, is it safe in the Philippines? Ironic really, isn't it, that so many letters coming from America are from people who are afraid for their safety in the Philippines. Thanks for looking in. I felt compelled just to make that comment. It's only my opinion, and like we know, everybody has one. So, bye for now.